Everyone has their hobbies, which consist of collecting, working on cars, taking pictures, drawing, and sometimes extreme activities. Some examples of these extreme activities are BMX, motocross, drag racing, mountain climbing, and many others. But one of these extreme activities you can enjoy anytime, almost anywhere, is riding a street bike. Today I will share with you the dangers of owning a street bike. What I mean when I refer to street bikes are the type of motor-powered bikes that are legal for street, for example, Harleys, choppers, and the common street bike. Yes, street bikes are dangerous in many ways. There are also ways to be safe, and I don't mean by just wearing the right clothing and a helmet. Some people may think you can just jump on your bike and be able to drive it, but little do they know it takes practice and skill to drive the bike right and the safe way. One reason why bikes can be dangerous is if the driver of the bike is not properly clothed. Most of the time you see drivers of these bikes not wearing the protective clothing that is offered for sale, which can actually help prevent a lot less injuries. The correct clothing for a motorcycle also includes bright colors so that when you are riding on the streets, drivers of cars and trucks are able to spot you out quickly. And reflective material on a bike and clothing will also help at night for drivers to see you because of the small amount of lighting on a bike. In the picture here, you can see what clothing helps protect. On this side, you can see if it wasn't protected, the types of damages you would cause to your body. Ones that you get a lot of damage are in your hands if you're not wearing gloves. As usual, you need a helmet. And this one, he has a neck brace. The jacket's a bright red. He has his boots on. And then here, if you didn't have boots or the correct shoes, severe tear and toes amputated, and a lot of burns too. Motorcycles are enjoyed by many ages, age ranging from 19 to 60 years old. Each group has their amount of fatal and non-fatal accidents. From the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, it states that the highest death and injury rate were among 20 to 24 years old. A lot of the motorcycle drivers would be found not to be trained by a professional, but by a family member or friend that has little knowledge and experience. Driving a motorcycle takes a lot of practice to be able to grasp the concept of being safe out on the road because of the driver being so vulnerable to anything bigger than it. Motorcycles don't have an outer shell like cars do, making it obvious that if a rider of a motorcycle will encounter a lot more injuries than the person in a car accident. After a motorcycle and car accident, the driver of the car is asked if they saw the motorcycle, and more than 60% of the time, the driver of the car says no. Motorcycles are so small compared to cars that they can vanish in a car's blind spot for a long time, which makes the driver encounter an accident with the motorcycle. That's why, in order for a motorcycle to avoid these types of situations, training is needed by a professional to help you explain and the tips and tricks of driving a motorcycle when cars are around. The graph is pretty self-explanatory. The green is, just injuries, and the blue is deaths. You can tell by usually our age range, there's more deaths than you'd say 60 and in the 50s range. In the last graph you saw the death rate and injury rate of certain ages, but now in this pie graph, I want to share with you the common injuries found in a motorcycle accident. The four common areas of injuries from the graph are the leg, foot, head, and neck. You can see on the pie graph that 22% of the injuries is the neck and head, which is the second highest injury compared to 30% of the leg and foot being injured. Your head and neck are a very important area that you do not want to injure because of the nervous system going down your neck. If there was a serious injury to the neck area, you could possibly become paralyzed in certain areas depending on the type of neck injuries. Even wearing a helmet helps a lot from serious injuries, but doesn't stop an injury 100%. A lot of the time, injuries to the foot and legs are skin loss, burns, and broken bones. There are stories of people having to amputate their foot and leg because of such a serious accident. Another reason that makes driving a motorcycle so dangerous is the fact that streets aren't really made for motorcycles, but mainly cars and trucks. We always see motorcycles driving through the middle of lanes to get out of traffic or to just get ahead and avoid cars. With motorcycles being so small, a car can just suddenly change lanes and not see the motorcycle coming up the middle of the lane. One area that is really dangerous is the freeways because of all the high-speed cars, SUVs, and semis. Yes, experienced bikers can avoid an accident because they have a lot of experience or were trained by a professional. From a personal experience, not many people come out of a motorcycle accident with no broken bones. I had one friend and 2 family friends that were seriously injured and killed. My friend from high school was clipped by a car and couldn't control the bike and ended up breaking his leg and receiving lots of cuts and burns from the asphalt. One of the family members I knew was ran over by a car a couple of years back because the driver did not see him coming up on the side. The family friend was in a blind spot of the car, and because the driver, there's no one fine because they didn't cause the accident. They were just seen by the drivers of the car. That's why it is important to have the right teaching and practice before you start driving on the streets or freeways. Hopefully with this information you can grasp the idea of owning a street bike. It's just not up, it's up to the person that wants to own one to make the right choices and protect his or herself on the road. Thank you.
Luna, you here?
Yeah.
Tell us what you think.
I liked it. It had a lot of good information, and I think like the visuals went well with it, like the charts he had to explain what he was saying. And I liked the personal story also because he had factual data and he had his own personal experience. And I think the only thing I did catch was I didn't hear a thesis statement in the beginning to say the points that were going to be explained. But overall, it was good. And
All right. I heard a specific purpose statement. What I didn't hear was the preview about what the supporting points were going to be, and that seems to be what you were talking about also. And so I think you're right. There is a problem there. In the body of the speech, I can kind of pick out things that are segments of material. They're usually organized by the visuals, and and that's about it. So. You really want to be a little bit more forceful about creating that organizational structure so that we know how all this information is going to be put together. It's not exactly random, but sometimes I'm wondering why we're talking about one piece of information which seemed to fit better with something that you talked about a little bit earlier. The whole first section seems to be organized around the safety equipment, for instance, and then the second or the third sections have to do with the kinds of injuries that you get or the frequency of those injuries. And then there's also kind of a point in there that seems to come up in a couple of places about training and learning how to do those things. There was one place where you suggested that there are some kind of tricks or tips that might be taught to people to avoid driving in the blind spot, or that a trained educator or trainer, for instance, would be able to help people with that maybe your family friend who rides a motorcycle couldn't tell you about. And I was wondering immediately what those kinds of tips or tricks were so that I'd have some idea about how that prevents the accidents that you're talking about, but you never really went into any information about that. The visuals, I think, are all pretty effective visuals. The first one just tells us what the topic is. The second one does a nice job comparing what the injuries or potential injuries are and what the protective clothing or alternatives are. And so that's easy, kind of that cutaway shot. I thought that worked pretty effectively. Both of the statistical pieces of information were very clear and easy to follow, but they do feel a little bit isolated by themselves since, like I said, I think you needed to give us a little bit more information on what kinds of things people need to do to prevent those sorts of accidents. We got a lot about all the negative consequences of the